The Haunted Voyage, Captain Steve's Nightmare on the Sea. One day, there was a passenger ship traveling in an unknown sea. The captain of this ship, Steve, was happy to sail in the calm waters. However, one day strange events began on the ship. The ship's passengers retreated to their cabins after having dinner. But at midnight, a scream of terror was heard. Steve immediately ran to the scene and was horrified by what he saw. A passenger was lying on the ground covered in blood, eyes wide open in fear. Panic started on the ship following the incident. Steve checked the ship's security cameras and saw something horrifying. A shadowy figure entered the passenger's cabin and then showed the passenger dying. Steve began to suspect that there was a murderer on the ship. According to the claims of one of the passengers, the person committing the murder on the ship was someone dressed in black and masked. However, they hadn't seen such a person on the ship's security cameras. Steve started searching every corner of the ship, and every day a passenger was found dead. Chaos on the ship was increasing. Passengers were looking at each other with suspicion, and everyone wanted to ignore the danger. Steve was trying every way to find out who the killer was. But mysteriously, the killer kept escaping everyone's notice and continued to kill people one by one. One night, Steve was alone in the ship's bridge. Suddenly, he heard a sound behind him, and when he turned around, he faced a figure dressed in black and masked. In a panic, not knowing what to do, Steve felt the figure slowly approaching. Though Steve tried to run, the figure didn't allow him to get even a step closer. Finally, the figure took off the mask, revealing the ship's owner. The owner threatened the captain and asked him to leave the ship. However, things were not as they seemed. The owner confessed to being a real killer and said he wanted to kill everyone on the ship. Steve panicked, did everything he could to stop the owner, and finally, the police arrived on the ship. The owner was taken into custody, and the days of terror on the ship ended. However, Steve would never forget the horror he experienced that night and would never escape the curse of the ship lost in the dark waters of the sea. From that day on, he began having nightmares every night, with the ship's screams echoing in his ears. As years passed, Steve continued his sea voyages as a ship captain. However, he could never get over the event he experienced that night. He kept having nightmares every night, hearing the echoes of the murder on the ship. He now believed the ship was cursed. One day, while Steve was traveling at sea again, stormy weather began. Waves started to shake the ship, and the sky darkened. Steve did everything he could to keep control of the ship, but everything became uncontrollable. Suddenly, a massive shadow appeared on one side of the ship. As Steve watched in shock, the shadow slowly approached. At that moment, he realized it was the ghost of the owner. The owner's eyes gleamed with rage, wanting to take over the ship. Steve, in a panic, didn't know what to do. The owner's ghost began to spread darkness over the ship. As a last resort, Steve took the helm and fought against the storm with all his might. While trying to overcome the massive waves facing the ship, the owner's ghost kept getting stronger. Finally, Steve made a decision. Desperately, he decided to confront the owner's ghost and challenged him. When they made eye contact, Steve realized that the owner's ghost was actually a reflection of his own fears. He decided to face the fears he had been carrying since that night, and the owner's ghost slowly disappeared. The storm ended, and the ship anchored in calm waters again. Having faced his experiences, Steve now had control over his fears. The curse of the ship lost in the depths of the sea had also ended. Steve continued his sea journey, leaving behind the days of terror on the ship. Now he was stronger and braver against the mysteries of the dark waters. And perhaps facing the events of that night taught him what true heroism was. The guardian of the deep, a fisherman's encounter with the ocean's spirit. The darkness of the night rose above the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The night was shrouded in the mysteries of the deep sea. A fishing boat was quietly advancing through the ocean waters, the hum of its engine the only sound around. The fishermen on board were heavy-eyed with fatigue. After a long day of fishing and organizing tasks on the boat, they had left behind an intense day. The ship's captain was trying to control the waves of the sea when one of them suddenly noticed that the sea had strangely calmed. Normally, the waves would be high and the wind would be blowing hard at this hour. Unease spread among the fishermen. One hurriedly ran to the deck of the ship and froze at the sight. A chilling layer of fog had begun to spread over the sea. The fog enveloped the ship, casting a dark atmosphere around it. The fishermen looked at each other in concern. As they tried to understand what this strange event meant, odd sounds began emanating from the depths of the sea. The sounds seemed to be coming from beneath the ship. The fishermen, moving in unison, quickly dropped the weight ropes and sprang into action. Suddenly, the ship's engine stopped. The captain urgently checked the control panel, but found no issue. At that moment, the lights on the ship began to go out one by one. The fishermen clung to each other in panic. One, confused, exclaimed, "This is a cursed event. We must abandon the ship." Then an echo was heard on the ship. At first, it seemed distant, but it gradually approached and resonated where the ship was. The fishermen were enveloped in a wave of fear around the ship. One, continuing his search with wide eyes, uttered a single word after a moment of hesitation. Double quotes mermaid ... double quotes as the fishermen looked at each other in doubt and fear. They saw a slowly emerging silhouette in the waters of the sea. Accompanied by the strange sounds from the depths, the ghostly figure dancing around the ship made the fishermen shiver in terror. The captain had to make a quick decision. "Turn on that light immediately," he shouted. The fishermen, fueled by panic, turned the ship's lights back on. And at that moment, the layer of fog over the sea revealed the ghostly figure surrounding the ship like a protective veil. The mermaid stood before the fishermen. The mermaid, with her black hair and clear blue eyes, looked at the fishermen. She leaned her hands on the side of the ship, spreading a mystical atmosphere. The fishermen watched, mesmerized by the mermaid's enchanting beauty. The mermaid began to speak in a gentle tone. "I am the guardian of the sea. You are harming it. Please respect the depths of the sea and do not disturb its peace," she said. The fisherman listened to the mermaid's words with concern. Summoning his courage, the captain asked, "Who are you, and what do you want?" The mermaid replied sadly, "I was once a girl who lived as a human. After an accident at sea, I became like this. Now I am here to protect the sea, its tranquility, and its beauty." As the fishermen listened to the mermaid's sorrowful story, their fear and anxiety gradually gave way to understanding. The captain asked the mermaid, "What should we do? What do you want?" The mermaid said, "You must stop polluting the sea. Do not disturb its natural balance. If you do not follow these rules, the sea will send me to attack you." The fishermen took the mermaid's warning seriously and held a meeting on the ship. The first decision they made was to collect the trash in the sea and stop polluting it. Additionally, they decided to halt fishing for a while to avoid disturbing the mermaid's peace. The mermaid, pleased with the fishermen's decision, thanked them and disappeared back into the waters with the layer of fog. The fishermen continued their daily tasks with determination, not forgetting the mermaid's warning. The ghostly presence of the mermaid and the experience of that night remained an eternal memory on the fishing boat. From that day forward, the fishermen paid more attention to the sea and the mermaid's warnings, showing greater respect for the sea's beauty and mysteries. Thus, the waters of the Atlantic Ocean continued to swirl peacefully under the mermaid's watchful eye. Over time, the fishing boat lived in harmony with the sea, heeding the mermaid's warnings. The mermaid occasionally visited the boat, providing the fishermen with knowledge about the sea and encouraging them in their role as guardians of the ocean. With the mermaid's help, the fishermen began to discover the deeper secrets of the sea and ponder more on the balance of nature. Gradually, the fishermen forged a friendship with the mermaid. She shared stories from her world, helping them explore the sea's mysteries. This friendship was a valuable experience for both the fishermen and the mermaid. The sea had become a cleaner and more peaceful place. The crew, having learned from the mermaid's teachings and warnings, deepened their love for the sea. The sea became an indispensable part of their lives. The ghostly presence of the mermaid would remain an unforgettable memory for the fishermen. In the end, the fishermen bid farewell to the mermaid with gratitude and continued to look at the sea with infinite respect. The mermaid wished them a happy and peaceful life and disappeared into the sea's waters. The fishing boat, recalling the unforgettable night with the mermaid, sailed on to new adventures. And so, the fishing boat that fished in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean continued its journey filled with hope, respect, and love alongside the mermaid's presence. The sea would always hold a special place in their lives, forever protected by the mermaid's warnings. And thus, the tale that began with the ghostly presence of the mermaid ended in friendship and love. The haunted yacht, Markov's night of reckoning. In the cold lands of Russia, at the heart of Moscow, billionaire Markov's yacht, moored next to his sprawling mansion, began experiencing strange occurrences. Despite all his luxury and wealth, Markov could not find peace. For some time, he had been hearing strange noises and seeing shadows, but he hadn't thought to tell anyone. That was until a night when he hosted a lavish party on his yacht for his elite guests. Among those making their way from Markov's mansion to his yacht were some of Russia's most prominent businessmen, politicians, and artists. Markov's wealth and power were envied by everyone. But this wealth and power had begun to turn into a curse for him. As the party started, Markov and his guests began to enjoy themselves in the luxurious salon of the yacht. Champagne was popped and music played. However, as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. First, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the yacht into darkness and silence. As Markov and his guests looked at each other in confusion, they heard a strange noise echoing through the yacht's corridors. Markov's eyes filled with fear as he noticed the electronic devices on the yacht starting to malfunction in bizarre ways. TVs turned on by themselves, and radios emitted strange noises. As the guests were gripped by terror and confusion, they saw a ghostly figure wandering through the yacht. Following this specter with his eyes, Markov felt the dark secrets of the yacht's past starting to come to light. He believed that a spirit seeking revenge for his past wrongdoings had taken over the yacht. Despite all his luxury and wealth, Markov's greatest fear had come true. Finding traces of the ghost in every corner of the yacht, Markov decided to warn his guests and call for help to avoid dragging them into danger. But suddenly, the electronic devices began to explode, and the yacht was engulfed in flames. As Markov and his guests tried desperately to survive, the ghost's power continued to grow. As the yacht was completely consumed by flames, Markov and his guests managed to escape in a final desperate effort. However, the effects of the nightmare they experienced that night would linger for a long time. Markov realized that his wealth and power had become a curse. The burning of the yacht marked a turning point for him. Markov would never be able to forget that night and would have to confront the horrific events he experienced. Wealth and power had never brought him happiness. That night served as a lesson for Markov and his guests. He understood that true happiness could not be bought with money, and that spiritual peace and inner tranquility were the real riches. Standing among the wreckage of the yacht, Markov looked around with fearful eyes. As he searched for traces of the ghost, a dark figure suddenly emerged from the wreckage. Markov and his guests held their breath as they looked at the dark figure. It was the mysterious ghost itself. The ghost's eyes glowed, spreading unease around it. Markov's courage seemed to falter, but this time he chose to face the ghost rather than flee. The ghost approached silently and whispered in Markov's ear, "Acknowledge your past mistakes, feel remorse, and forgive." Markov, shocked and scared, looked into the ghost's eyes. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the middle of the wreckage, as if it was meant to guide him. Markov understood the message from the ghost and accepted his past mistakes with deep remorse. The ghost momentarily became indistinct and then disappeared entirely. Markov and his guests managed to escape from the wreckage of the yacht. Markov decided to live his life more meaningfully from then on. He gave up the pursuit of wealth and power and sought inner peace. Some of his guests observed this change in him and decided to support him. The horrifying experience of that night became a turning point for Markov. He had stripped away the mask of wealth and power and began to seek true happiness and peace. Although the wreckage of the yacht remained behind, his spiritual transformation would last forever. And perhaps he began to think that this experience had to be lived as it was to find true happiness. After the dreadful experience, Markov completely changed his life. He gave up the pursuit of wealth and power and focused on finding inner peace. Taking the ghost's message to heart, he began the process of forgiving and feeling remorse for his past mistakes. Markov now lived a more introspective life, treating the people around him with greater understanding and generosity. Cleansed of the darkness of the past, he looked to the future with hope. With the support of his guests, he shaped his life in a more meaningful way. Though the wreckage of the yacht remained, Markov's inner transformation had changed everything. He now knew that true happiness could not be bought with money, and that spiritual peace and inner tranquility were the real wealth. Thanks to the ghost's warning, he realized he could make his life more valuable. Even though he would never forget that terrifying night, the experience provided Markov with an opportunity for greater growth and development. That night had forever changed his life and taught him that true happiness could be achieved not just through material values, but through inner wealth. And so, he moved forward resolutely toward a brighter future, free from the dark past. Thank you for listening.